Welcome, friends, to another episode of the Dubcast with Dubside. I'm Andrew Alzaga, and I have on the phone with me Dubside.
Yes, I'm Dubside. Here I am.
All right. Hey, I really enjoyed the last Dubcast, and I wanted to ask you some questions about rolling in cold water because you covered some of that.
Okay.
Did you always wear a Tuilik?
No, I didn't have one initially when I started rolling. I think that first year at Delmarva, there were only a few people that had them then, and I ordered one. There was somebody there who was a dealer for the Brooks stuff, so I ordered one then. And then once I started using that, I think I pretty much used that exclusively for rolling because it keeps the water out of your ears.
That's always been a big issue when practicing rolling for me is getting water in your ears.
Yeah.
That's why I asked about it. What were you using before you got the Tuilik to keep water out of your ears?
Oh, I didn't have anything, so water would get in my ears. But I wasn't rolling in really cold water, so it was summertime stuff.
Yeah. When I first started without a Tuilik, after about 15 minutes of rolling practice in cold water, it was just impossible because you can get really dizzy and nauseated doing that.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's because the cold water stimulates your inner ear and it could cause vertigo.
Yeah. I believe George Grunstead told me once, he has such vast experience. So he said, he figures out it's like 1 out of every 3 or 1 out of 4 people really, feel that cold water in the ear and it really throws them off. Other people, it doesn't seem to bother as much, but he finds out, some 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4. So whenever he teaches rolling, he's got nose plugs and various things to keep the water out of your ears.
I've used nose plugs and I've used even ear plugs. They sell them, I think, for surfers.
Yeah.
They're a little bit more trouble to use, but the thing that I wanted to recommend, which I've been using for a long time, is the cold water surf hood that O'Neill sells.
Okay.
I'll put a link in the show notes, but it's the O'Neill cold water surf hood with drawstring that tightens up the seal around your face.
Kind of sounds like the top of a Tuilik.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it works so well.
Yeah, all right.
My Tuilik's only sized for an ocean-sized cockpit.
Okay.
So if I am paddling in a kayak with a standard cockpit and using a regular spray skirt, you can't wear a Tuilik, so you have to wear a hood, and that's the one I use for practicing rolling.
Okay.
But there's nothing that I found that compares to wearing a Tuilik for keeping the water out of the kayak and water out of your ears. It's just really the best thing to wear for practicing rolling.
Well, after you've rolled 30 or 40 times, you're practicing for competition. Yes, so water's going to get in, but in your kayak and around your body. But it's not going to get into your ears. It'll just be sloshing around.
Now, did you ever use nose plugs?
Nose plugs?
Yeah, or nose clips?
I did, I think originally, yeah. I mean, when I learned, I used them. I stopped after a while because, you're allowed to use nose plugs in competition, but I guess, just for the combat rolling aspect of it, since I'm not wearing nose plugs all the time, if I happen to go under, I want to be used to rolling without them. And I just use a technique where I'm just blowing slowly, pushing air out of my nose, but I'm still pushing out when I get it back up. So I don't have unlimited time because I only have so much air to blow out my nose, but that's what I do. Now, some people in Greenland will let their nostrils completely flood with water, which doesn't feel as bad in salt water. But in some of the places I roll, you don't want that water getting anywhere inside your nasal cavity. So I'm pretty much blowing the air out of my nose all the time I'm going under.
Yeah. One of the most valuable things I ever learned from you, I think, was being able to control your breathing so that you can blow out while you're rolling so that you don't get any water in your nose and you don't need nose plugs.
Well, I guess I should acknowledge that it's not instinctive. It feels natural to me, but that's because I've been doing it for so long. But to somebody who hasn't tried that before, it's one more thing you have to think about, and then you're trying to figure out a roll and try to remember to blow out your nose, and everything just goes out of whack. So just using nose plugs makes it a lot a lot easier to learn without one less thing to think about.
Well, this Dubcast is interesting because you talk about the Delmarva Paddlers Retreat, the premier Greenland paddling event in North America. Do you think Delmarva is going to happen this year? What are the rumors on that?
I think so. I think the Minnesota gathering is happening the first week of September. They're planning on it. I thought they'd invited me to come. And I would say the chances for Delmarva are pretty good this year. And if it's on, I'll definitely be there. You can be sure of that.
Well, that would be great. Be sure to let us know as soon as you find out.
So I'm thinking that the way this podcast is going, I mean, people seem to be enjoying it. So maybe in the future we could do a live Dubcast at one of the Kayak USA events.
That would be an awesome idea.
Yeah, well, might not be this year. Maybe by next year we'll do that.
We'll make the time for it and make it happen.
Yeah.
All right. So with that out of the way, let's get on to the next Dubcast.
All right.
Welcome to the Dubcast with Dubside. This is Dubcast number 4. I will be telling you about a freshwater tidal marsh where I first started paddling, the pace of progress in my early attempts to learn how to roll, a very important event in traditional kayaking history called the Delmarva Paddlers Retreat, a very important woman in regard to that event named Robin Snow, a guy from Greenland named Pavia Lumholt, and I will tell you about another DVD that you can look at your leisure for absolutely free. And we will wrap it up with another piece of Greenlandic music you have not heard before. I hope you're ready for the ride. Here we go. There is an airport on the southwestern edge of Philadelphia, right along the Delaware River. And on the northwestern edge of that airport is a wildlife area known as the John Hines National Wildlife Refuge at Tinicum. It is a freshwater tidal marsh, and that is where I started to go kayaking on a regular basis. And one of the first things I picked up on was that I had to listen to weather reports in a whole different way. I'd been previously focused on whether or not it was going to rain, as well as how cold it would get. But now, I had to pay attention to the wind, how strong the wind was going to get, and what direction it'd be blowing in. And also learned a whole new thing to pay attention to, the tides. I had figured out bus and trolley routes to get to either the upstream end of this wildlife refuge or the lower end of it, right where it feeds into the Delaware. And I could take a one-way trip through there. So if I paid attention to what the tides and the wind were doing, I could get the benefit of a little help from the wind and the tides and all the way through paddling. If I read the tides or the wind wrong, I'd have to fight them all the way through. At extreme low tides, there'd be hardly enough water to paddle through a lot of places, with all the tires and other junk poking up through the mud. At very high tide, I could get all the way back up into the little nooks and crannies of the marsh and explore these various areas. The main creek that goes through there winds through the cattails and reed grass, and I explored into the deep reaches, and there's, on one side you have the wildlife refuge, and on the other side of the creek there's some industrial areas, or maybe they're abandoned industrial areas. Way up in one section there's a big, it's like a big tall hill, but there are no trees on the top of it. It's just grass. I couldn't quite figure out what that was. And then farther down there, it turns into, there's the backs of residential houses, and then almost down to the Delaware, there's a marina with all the boats and things tied up there. It's a very interesting place. Lots of fun exploring through there. A lot of interesting birds pass through there, including ospreys, hawks, and eagles. After about 6 months, I found out that hill area had been a landfill, and several of those industrial sites were candidates for Superfund cleanup because the chemicals stored there were that bad, and those things were leaching into the water there. And I took to finding other places to paddle in the area because someone had not respected and protected my friend. Fortunately, I had not yet tried to learn how to roll, so I didn't put my head in that water there. I started paddling out to the Delaware River. And on the Delaware River, below the airport, it is almost a mile wide. And I found a very interesting island down there. It's called Tinicum Island. Very long, narrow strip of land, almost 2 miles long. And at the eastern end, it's a bit wider. There's a lagoon there, then there's some sandy beaches. I could try to describe it in detail, but in this day and age, all you have to do is go online, and you can zoom right down on it yourself with the aerial view. In the summertime, there'd be motorboats. People would go out there and do barbecues and stuff like that. In the wintertime, there would be nobody out there except for me. In the wintertime, I considered that my island. I would go out there camping overnight. I had lots of fun on that island. I'll tell you more about that sometime. If you remember, I described getting my roll to work for the first time, but let me back up a little before that. The initial information I had about folding kayaks indicated that they weren't suitable for rolling, and rolling was a skill that didn't really apply to folding kayaks. That wasn't something that was commonly done in folding kayaks. But I was talking to Randy, you remember my kayak dealer in New York, I ordered the K-Lite from, and he mentioned in passing that you can roll a Feathercraft K-Lite, which was news to me. And that got me curious enough to want to figure out how to do it, if it was possible. And I thought, well, I really want to learn how to do this then. Gathering all the information I could find, which included the Derek Hutchinson book, I studied it and tried to get a handle on how this would work. And then I see that looking at my logbook, it was June 26th, 1999. Went out to a quiet little cove in a river in New Jersey and proceeded to turn the kayak upside down. And as I've been fond of telling my students in rolling classes that I teach, I proceeded to fall out of the kayak. And the spray skirt just popped off and it just came right out. And like that first time I ever got in the kayak, I'm in the water, floating up to the side, wondering why it didn't work. That was as far as I got that day, but I considered it a good day because I did learn that somehow I'm going to have to hold myself into the kayak with my legs so that I don't just fall right out as soon as the kayak tips over. I've been saying for years now when I teach classes that it took me 3 times by myself trying to roll and still nothing happened, and then I went to a pool and it was the 3rd time at the pool that I finally got one very shaky roll to work. That's how I've always remembered it. But only recently did I go back to my logbook to see all the details. In June of '99, I tried to roll by myself, didn't work. The next time I tried was September of '99. Looking at that now, I'm thinking, you wimp, what is your problem? Here's the middle of summer, great time to practice rolling, and you didn't do anything until September? Come on. Now, I did do the next time 5 days after that, so that's not too bad. Then to go to the pool, I waited till November. Well, maybe the excuse there is that they didn't have pool sessions until November. All right, I'll accept that. So November in the pool didn't work. The next time I tried in a pool was January? You wimp. What is your problem? Going to take a little more persistence and dedication than that if you're going to get anywhere anytime soon. Well, completely by chance, I happened to be taking rolling instruction at pool sessions run by the Philadelphia Canoe Club, and the woman doing the sea kayak sessions was named Robin Snow. And those pool sessions ran from November to the end of March or early April. And once I finally got the roll to work and was bitten by the bug, I made it a priority to be at every one of those pool sessions. Every 2 weeks I was there for the next 2 or 3 years. Before I left Philadelphia, I'd been to that pool 38 times, which is somewhat of a better level of dedication than my early efforts. And since I've got all the data here, I can see that it was 62 times out in the kayak before I tried to roll, and 92 times in a kayak before I got the roll to actually work. So I did have a roll just before I sent Randy the brass plaque at voyage number 100. Well, Robin Snow just happened to be the organizer of an event called the Delmarva Paddlers Retreat that had been going on. It was a weekend kayak get-together held in Delaware, started in 1988, and under her influence, it had become the premier Greenland-style paddling event in the U.S. It's held usually the first week of October at a summer camp on an ocean bay. Having heard that this is where all the Greenland Rolling activity takes place, I wanted to go, and in 2000 I attempted to go, but back then Delmarva was the only one in the country, and it had a capacity of about 100 people, and it would fill up maybe a month, 2 months, maybe 3 months before it went on. And so Robin would have to put people on the waiting list, and I waited too long to get in, and so I couldn't go in 2000 and had to wait until 2001 to get there the first time. And that event changed my life. To hang out for an entire weekend with people who were as fanatical about Greenland kayaking as I was, that was paradise. After attending the first one, I've been back every year since, which provides me with a wealth of stories to relate to you about all the goings-on at this event, and a large, colorful cast of characters to tell you all about. I was one time talking with Robin about somebody at the event with their own eccentricities, and I said, yeah, you know, like kayaking tends to attract some pretty strange people sometimes. And she looks at me and she goes, well, that's certainly the pot calling the kettle black. And I had to pause and reflect and think, oh, well, I guess that's right. I'm not exactly Mr. Normal myself. To quote a comedy group from a long time ago, I think we're all bozos on this bus. Anyway, the second time I went to the Delmarva Paddlers Retreat, which we just called Delmarva for short, they had a guy from Greenland there named Pavia Lumholt. Now, before I start throwing out more and more terms and the vocabulary gets more complicated to keep track of, recapping, we have the Tuilik, the garment worn when rolling, the Norsok that throws the harpoon, we have Styx, the event in Seattle, and now we're adding Delmarva, the event in Delaware. I can provide a handy shortcut to gaining familiarity with all these terms, as well as a visual so you can see what some of these people look like. And that is a video that I made in 2008 entitled Modern Greenland Kayaking. And this is a documentary about how the popularity of Greenland-style kayaking developed in this country. And this video, since nobody buys DVDs anymore, has been posted on the internet by Andrew, and you can see it for free. And there you can see what Robin Snow looks like. She's interviewed quite a bit. And let's see, Freya Hofmeister's in there a little bit. Sherry Perry is in there. Pavia Lumholt, who I'm getting ready to describe now, is in there. So if you get a chance, take a look at that. It also includes footage taken at the Greenland competition. I'll try not to assume that you've seen that as I continue episode to episode, but if you do get a chance, it provides some clarity and things are a little bit easier to visualize. Second year Delmarva. I'm there early, day early, and Robin lets me go out, paddle out with Pavia Lumholt, the guy from Greenland, just me and him. It's like a private lesson. At that point, I didn't quite have a hand roll yet, but the other stuff I was pretty good at. And I thought I was, I thought I had some competence. I thought I was solid intermediate, headed for advanced level. And we're out there, and Pavia says, oh, let's try some of these forward rolls, reverse sweep roll, storm roll. And he proceeds to do them, and I'd never seen anybody roll and end up on the front deck. Everything I did would end up and I'd lay all the way down on the back deck. And that's because the people I'd taken instruction from couldn't do any forward-ending rolls. And so for all practical purposes, we're pretending they didn't exist. And Pavia showed me a storm roll, and I'd been doing, I called it a storm roll, but as I, in my first rolling video described, it was a fake storm roll where you just roll laying back and then quickly lean forward, pretending like that's was the whole roll there. But that's a fake storm roll, not the real thing. So working with Pavia that day, I suddenly discovered there's a whole second half of rolling all the forward ending stuff. It's like I missed half the whole fun here. Quite eye-opening for me. I was also keen to learn the Greenlandic names of these rolls, and having a real Greenlander there to pronounce them properly, I had him sit down with it, had a tape recorder, and was recording him saying all the names. So, Stormroll, Shuukut Baslatishlu Mashikut. Stormroll, right? Shuukut Baslatishlu Mashikut. What a beautiful language. And the following year, 2003, Pavia was the special guest from Greenland once again. And I think he came 3, 4, several times in a row to Delmarva. He was in medical school on his way to becoming a doctor. And like a lot of people that I've met over the years, unfortunately, they get into other things and their life takes other directions and they stop paddling and we don't see them anymore. And Pavia is now a surgeon in Denmark. And I called him up a while back. His phone number worked. I talked to him. He was happy to hear from me. He wanted to say hi to everybody from back in the kayak days. But we haven't seen him for a long time at any of the kayaking events. He's got a family and children and other things to occupy himself with now. He comes from an interesting family. His father was Danish and his mother was Greenlandic, and he's got a brother, a sister, maybe more than that, but at least a brother and a sister. And they all are very, very well-trained vocalists, and they would sing together. And Greenland has a tradition of the chorale music, where you have many voices singing together a cappella. I'll save the details of that for the future. There's so much fine Greenlandic music to make you aware of. I was told that the year before I went the first time to Delmarva, they usually have a bonfire down by the beach on Saturday night, and Pavia treated the group there to a rendition of Rocky Raccoon. That must have been nice around the campfire. Although he is no longer attending kayak events, Pavia's legacy lives on. In sea kayaking, there is a technique where you can rescue somebody who is turned over without them needing to assist you. And so you paddle over to them and you can grab hold of usually the strap of their PFD, and just pull their whole body up out of the water. So even if they're unconscious, you get them out. And this is referred to as the Hand of God Rescue. It works somewhat differently in a skin-on-frame kayak, and Pavia Lumholt developed a technique where it doesn't even require grabbing the person. You just take the end of the kayak, and there's a special way to grab the kayak with your arms, and you force yourself down into the water. Your head goes into the water, and that adds the sort of a leverage to bring the other person right up out of the water. And when done properly, you can pop a small person can get a big heavy person who's completely limp right up out of the water. It's quite something to see somebody pull this off, but it has to be practiced. Carefully. And so we have taken to calling that, in tribute to Pavia, the inventor of that technique, the Hand of Pavia Rescue. And there's a guy I'll be telling you about, a guy who makes paddles in Oregon named Don Beale. And he goes to several of the Kayak USA events, and he'll do a class in this Hand of Pavia technique. Very, very handy thing to learn. Could save a life. I recommend it. Okay, music time. We'll start with lyrics. Guy from an earlier time period in Greenland, who was a sculptor, artist, poet named Hans Lunge, passed away in 1988. Just as he was on his deathbed, I suppose. He was dying of tuberculosis, and he wrote a poem called The Sky of the Dawning Sun. Sun as S-U-N, Sekinek is a Greenlandic word. The poem goes like this. When the glorious sky of the dawning sun awakens the teeny birds, it calls, hasten your little wings and soar. Thus the little bird smooths and trims its wings, filling the air, praising the day, reaching the unapproachable sky up there and fades away. When you looked directly into my eyes, my beloved, it opened mine to a shining heart, and I look at you, loving you, my dear son. Advancing towards my goal in such heat, while pulling the oars with aching arms, you help me float, my little wind. When winter kills the flowers, clad in their beautiful dress, no matter. Around me blooms yet other ones, in your cheeks, your eyes, even in your hair, my beloved summer. Let me gracefully embrace you for loving me tightly, my beloved whom I call, my dear son, my little wind, my beloved summer. Now this poem, and by the way you can see the influence of nature on Greenlanders, poem was set to music by a guy named Juaaka Lyberth, Lyberth, Lyberth. And Juaaka was born in 1952 and has had a career as a journalist, a musician, and for sometimes he was a politician as well. And he put out in the 90s 3 different CDs of his music. And in 2011, he did another CD, and some of it he took some of his old material and reworked that. And he took this poem and recorded a song version of it. The CD is entitled Naasumik paju, and that would translate as flowers for you, maybe a gift of flowers for you. Naasumik, first word, paju, second word. Greenlandic title of the song, Nuile supkilap sekine suata, which is the sky of the dawning sun, or the sun rising in the sky, depending on how you translate it. Now in English, that third verse talks about the pulling the oars and the wind blowing, perhaps it's a rowboat or something like that. So not a kayak exactly, but I will tie this song directly to kayaking. Watch. First, let's hear the song.
Nuile supkilap sekine suata akisu nerata Uesi kunigit timiaranguit Imatosh natalai sudulingu vutit Kakanga tasarit Timiaranguan sudugi satarat nalelit satakak Silani pashtugu ushlok nesoshtugu Kilak panaheno natakash lishlugu Kisan gatarak Kiviarne pitamani Tokoshtunga asasan guara Uesi panga umamut kingotutut Isiga kishtu ishlita same sutut Sekininguara Angusa sara onindia tishdugu kiaga tishdugu Iputit amugu kitali ashtunga Ikia pamati siale sishdunga Anoranguara Ukiup tokuti pagut Nasunguit asua tunguit Somi ekani sikebut Ashlad nutat Uluan isini nuyanilat Asanguara Asagama kuyashlunga Pakushtagit ipera sanatit Asasanguara imatagugara Sekininguara anoranguara Asanguara
Well, now I would like you to go to atlanticmusic.gl and find a CD by Juaaka, Juaaka, entitled Naasumik Paju. It's got an orange circle on the cover with purple around the edges and the corners. And there's two dandelions with their seeds blowing into the wind in a pitcher. And if you listen to the fourth song on this CD, Nuile Supkilap Sekine Suata, you will hear Juaaka singing with two backup vocalists behind him, a male and a female voice. The female voice is a woman named Aviaya, and she has appeared from time to time on various musical projects in Greenland. And the other voice is her brother, and that would be Pavia Lumholt. See? It all ties back to kayaking. All right. Thanks for listening. And if you remember in episode 3, I was describing practicing rolling when the air temperature is in the 30s. Coming up in episode 5, I will describe practicing rolling when the air temperature is in the 20s. You might want to have a sweater handy to listen to that. To wrap up Dubcast number 4, here's Andrew with some final words.
This week's show notes has links to the O'Neill Psycho Cold Water 3mm hood, Feathercraft Kayaks, Dawn Beale Paddles, and Juaaka's Naasumik paju at atlanticmusic.gl. If you enjoyed this podcast, let us know what you think and drop us an email at dubcastwithdubside@gmail.com. And remember to please share, comment, like, and subscribe. Also, consider helping support the Dubcast with Dubside through Patreon. You can also donate directly using PayPal to our email address at dubcastwithdubside@gmail.com.